The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents a few thoughts on Satanists and Satanism. So as I mentioned, I did my most recent debate where my opponent was a Satanist. And it's the first time that's been the case. Normally I debate theists. On a couple of occasions I've debated just generic atheists on topics. But I found this interesting. We've already posted and talked a little bit about the debate. I thought I would talk about my interactions with members of the Satanist community prior to the debate, because I think there's a couple of lessons to be learned both for them and for the rest of us. Then talk a little bit about the background of Satanism. This is not going to be exhaustive. You can go out and do your own research if you want to learn a great deal about it, and kind of sum up with my thoughts about the broader Satanist community and how it relates to atheism, secular humanism, etc. So let's start with what happened regarding this debate. So it happened that I was going to be in Kentucky for a magic convention, and Jim Helton had invited me up to the Tri-States area up near Cincinnati to potentially do a talk, and they were also going to see if maybe they could find a debate opponent. Evidently, according to him, there wasn't a church in the area that had anyone who was willing to come debate me. But Mark, who did, I guess, reached out to them and said he was a Satanist, a member of, the Satanic Temple, and that he had an interest in debating me on the topic of, is religion a good thing? And Jim reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested. And I said, I've never debated a Satanist. It's kind of weird because I wouldn't have expected that there would be much disagreement between myself and a Satanist, or enough disagreement on a significant topic to warrant a debate. And that is probably the case. As we'll find out a little later, I'm generally in agreement with several different varieties of Satanism on many different things, particularly if they're, non-religious, secular, they're not appealing to the supernatural. But it was an interesting enough proposition, and I was going to be there anyway, that I said, hey, let's go ahead and do it. And when Jim announced this, there was an immediate backlash from members of the Satanic Temple. The concern was, we don't know who this guy is, we've never heard of him, maybe you should do some more checking into your debate opponents before you pick them. And I was a little taken aback, and I probably got a little snarky on a couple of occasions, but I kind of want to talk about why their defensiveness was perhaps justified. My first response was, I didn't pick this guy. I don't organize my own debates. I don't tend to pick my opponents. I didn't bother investigating this guy at all. And I never presumed that he would be perceived as speaking on behalf of the Satanic Temple, which was their primary concern. I look at this, when I'm debating an individual, I only consider them a representative of themselves and no one else. Even if they were coming to me, like if I was debating a Baptist preacher, and the Southern Baptist Convention said, this is our guy, and this guy is coming here to represent the Southern Baptist Convention in a debate against Matt Dillahunty on the resurrection of Jesus, I still wouldn't view it that way. It's like if I do much better than their representative, that doesn't mean that I've now demolished, as much as it might be fun to say so, the Southern Baptist Convention. So all of my debates and the opponents that I interact with, it's a one-on-one thing, and I'm only viewing them as representing themselves, in part because I'm only representing myself. I don't represent all of atheism. I don't represent atheist organizations. Even when I was president of the atheist community of Austin and could speak on behalf of the ACA, I was very cautious to make sure that almost all the time, unless I was reading a press release, my views were my own. Now, I understand why Satanists were so concerned about this, because they have been maligned and misrepresented, and it's like, oh my gosh, Matt Dillahunty's going to debate a Satanist and we've never heard of this guy, and what if people think he's representing us, and what if he does terrible? I appreciate why there was some concern, but we sorted it out, and evidently at one point we were going to switch to debate opponents. It was going to be, I was told Lucian Greaves was going to come down to do the debate, which really kind of made me curious, because the person I was debating, Mark, was defending the idea that religion is a good thing. And to switch debate opponents to, the spokesperson for the Satanic Temple without changing the topic gives me the impression that the Satanic Temple would hold as a general position that religion is a good thing. And so it may be the case that Mark was speaking for them or defending a position that they share, which I wasn't sure was the case. As it turned out, evidently Mark and Lucian had a discussion, and Mark showed up for the debate. And everything was sorted out and worked out. And I was like, this is going to be great. We're going to have this. There's not going to be this terrifying concern from Satanists. And then like a day before the debate or so, when we announced it and promoted it again, now the Church of Satan, which is a different satanic organization, they started hitting me up on Twitter with the exact same objections. What are this guy's credentials? And you should read our FAQ first so that you can be sure after all, atheists or Satanists are atheists and secular and blah, blah, blah. Now, I was a little peeved that they would presume that I wasn't aware that Satanists by and large are atheists and secular. But this defensiveness for the second time from a different satanic organization, I actually found kind of amusing because it highlights a problem that I'll talk about in a minute, where these two organizations aren't the same. They had no idea we'd resolved all this a couple weeks ago with regard to this guy in the Satanic Temple. So there's the Satanic Temple, and then there's the Church of Satan, and then there's several other splinter groups and stuff like that. But the point that I made to the Church of Satan Twitter account was that Mark's credentials are irrelevant. And their FAQ is irrelevant, because the debate wasn't about Satanism. It wasn't about the Satanic Temple. It wasn't about the Church of Satan. It wasn't about LaVeyan Satanism. It wasn't about trying to capture Aleister Crowley and make him a Satanist even when he wasn't. The concerns that they have, they're in such a reactionary position that they didn't even bother to look at this. The debate was, is religion a good thing? And you know what? I could have that debate against anybody, including someone who does not hold that position. There's a gentleman who's contacted me several times. I've done a podcast, and he reached out because he and a friend were going to do a debate where his friend was going to take the atheist position and he was going to take the theist position. And he asked, essentially what I thought about it, or did I have any, tips or suggestions on this. It doesn't really fit in with what I'm talking about with Satanists, but I want to include this point here because I think it's important. I don't recommend that. I know there's plenty of people who disagree with me. Chris DiCarlo, my debate opponent from several years ago at Imagine No Religion 5 or 2, or it was 2, I think. When somebody calls and asks him, would you like to debate? His answer is, sure, what side do you want me to take? And I understand that from an academic standpoint, from a debating as a skill standpoint, being able to debate the opponent's side is a wonderful thing, and you should be able to do it. I discourage two atheists from sitting down and saying, I'm going to play the theist and you're going to be the atheist and we're going to have this debate. Because when the debate's over, what have you accomplished? Well, the theists are going to look at that and say, well, he's not really a theist. He used some of the same arguments, but he didn't defend them as well or in the right way, or he got something subtly wrong. There's no win there. And when I say win, I'm not talking about a debate win. I'm talking about furthering the conversation. You're either going to be dismissed as attacking a straw man or unfairly representing a side, or engaging in some sort of caricature, or you might actually do a good enough job, and the person taking the non-theistic position does so poorly that ultimately it would be counterproductive to post it, because it'd be like, look, even the atheists can't defend their own position against a mock Christian. There's just no benefit to it. I do understand the frustration when it is difficult to find debate opponents. But you can have debates with other secular individuals without pretending to take a position. There's enough disagreement on real issues within the secular community that we could have good debates that might further the discussion and bridge some of the gaps in the secular community. There's a movement in the community and perhaps in society at large where we are failing to see nuance, and we are drawing lines in such a way that, oh, you disagree with me on this, therefore you are the worst thing ever, and I don't want anything to do with you, and blah, blah, blah. There are ways to fix that. Now, not everybody in every position is fixable. There are people who are, just contrarians and obstinate. There are people who are, have genuinely terrible core values that you would have to have discussions about. But I'm not a big fan of the mock debates. But getting back to the Satanists, what are we talking about when we talk about Satanists? And why is it that when the debate was over, the audience Q&A was almost exclusively, let's interview the Satanists to find out what's going on? Now, I'm not going to give you an exhaustive history of Satanism, in part because I'm not qualified to do so. I'm not a Satanist. I'm not speaking on behalf of any of the satanic organizations. I'm speaking as myself, and I wanted to address this because the crowd was really curious. There were atheists there who did not know that when Mark says he's a Satanist, that he's actually an atheist and a secularist. He's not appealing to anything supernatural. The Christian perspective or theistic perspective in culture is so strong that even most atheists, or some atheists, don't seem to be aware that Satanists are atheists, by and large, not every one of them. And that explains some of the backlash that we got from the Satanic Temple and the Church of Satan. Now, for clarity, the Satanic Temple is a relatively new organization formed in around, I think, 2014. And so it's struggling for legitimacy because it doesn't have strong ties to the history of Satanism. And Satanism is a confusing mesh of beliefs, positions, clubs, churches, and it's changed over the years. In some ways, it's gone back to the roots because the Satan wasn't a proper name originally. It was in Hebrew, it was just the adversary, and it was also then used as kind of a slur. Anybody who was doing things that were heretical or unorthodox were sometimes accused of, being Satanists or performing satanic rituals or, in league with the adversary, because it was very much an, if you weren't with us, you are against us. And if you were a Christian in the service of the one true perfect God, then just about the worst accusation you can make against somebody is that they are not only working in opposition to you, they are working for the opposition. They are in league with the devil, in league with Lucifer and Satan. There were a number of changes in satanic thought at different times. Even in the early 20th century, you had primarily Satanism as a reactionary sort of movement. Now, there were certainly occult interests and appeals to black magic and other things. That began to change in the late 60s, or I think it was mid to late 60s. You can check it out, with Anton LaVey, who is basically the father of LaVeyan Satanism, which is how we get to the modern Church of Satan, or actually I should say Churches of Satan, as there was evidently a schism or disagreement on where the church should be based. That LaVeyan Satanism it's come under criticism. It's even come under criticism from the new Satanic Temple as not really being about anything or doing anything. It's more of we find these foundational views appealing, and we're going to qualify as a religion on those grounds, but it's not active. The Satanic Temple, on the other hand, is far more active in church-state separation issues, in social justice issues, in making statements. And sometimes the way they go about it causes a lot of problems because it can appear to be parody when really my understanding is that they, even in being outrageous, or you might consider it like the shock jock of satanic activism, they're completely serious in the foundational positions. For example, if we're going to allow people, religious organizations, to put up their religious symbols and monuments on public land in front of courthouses and stuff, there's only a couple of options. Either we allow nobody to do it, or we allow every religion to do it equally. And so when they want to put up Ten Commandments monuments, the Satanic Temple comes along with a big, Baphomet statue that they've crowdfunded and said, okay, then we get to put up ours as well. And this is sufficiently terrifying to Christians that they're willing to give up, okay, maybe this isn't a fight we should take on. We'll take down our Ten Commandments in order to keep your satanic thing out. And it's important to note that that is in fact a good result. That is encouraging the sort of equality, the reduction of religious privilege and preferential treatment in the United States. And so I'm not a Satanist. If you take a look at the founding principles of something like the Satanic Temple, I'm largely not in agreement. I would make some subtle changes just for clarity, but by and large, these are good tenets that are based on reason and science and equality and individual autonomy and freedom. I am a fan of the work that some of them are doing because they have the opportunity to make points much more clearly and much more effectively than just an atheist group could ever hope to do. It would be nice if secular humanism, which, while I don't view it as a religion, it certainly has the same protections under the law as a religion, in the free exercise, free expression sense. It would be nice if secular humanism would have the same impact. And what we've seen is, the American Atheists putting up, an atheist monument bench. We've seen the Freedom from Religion Foundation putting up displays around Christmas time, solstice displays and other things like that. And they have been somewhat effective. I would argue they haven't been nearly as effective in making people recognize a potential problem as the Satanic Temple has been with Baphomet statues. And if you want to pass out Youth for Christ books to everybody at your public school and basically religious paraphernalia, well, they can come in with their Satanist coloring book as well. Because now if you're going to be able to pass out your religious documentation at a public school, then that means every other religion gets to as well. And that means that the Satanists are going to do it. Now, the thing I like the most is that if you go through, please, by all means, go Google, look up Satanic Temple or Satanic Coloring Book. You can find the stuff in there. They're teaching good object lessons. They are, there's virtually nothing that is objectionable other than the name. The imagery that people find terrifying, the Baphomet statue, the stereotypical view of Satan as the horned evil one and everything else. But the messages are good and the effectiveness is pretty good. So I'm largely a fan of most of what they're doing. There are exceptions. There's one incident that the Satanic Temple was involved in that I wholeheartedly object to. One of the things is there's this idea that there's no such thing as bad publicity. I disagree. I certainly appreciate the fact that you can draw attention to your case. But if you're just walking around, let's say, wearing a t-shirt that offends for the sake of offending without including any sort of object lesson, or if in fact you've got things wrong, now I think that you're engaged in the sort of bad publicity that diminishes your other efforts. When you look at something like Pastafarians, you have essentially a fictional religion. I mean, this was a construct from the beginning. It'd be no different to me than, and I'm sure I'm going to offend or irritate people. If you put down Jedi as your religion, The Star Wars franchise is a clearly invented fiction that was intended to be an invented fiction. Certainly you can have deeply held beliefs that are consistent with Jedi, but you don't, you're not a real Jedi. I mean, you're not part of that fantasy world. So there's Pastafarians, which was about a mocking cartoon that was made to make a point, and then people took it and said, "Oh, I'm a Pastafarian. I want to wear a colander on my head and stuff like that." Then there's the next step, which is Jedi's, and well, actually, probably the next step would be I'm House Gryffindor and House Slytherin, where we've taken a fictional thing and we've associated with it. And then the next thing would be Jedi, where we've taken something that was intentionally fictional and turned it into something that people really value. I'm not insulting them. Identify however you want. But you have something like Satanism, where it actually plays more into social political aspects of living in a culture that has been dominated by Christian theology, where the negative label that they would hurl at you, you then pick up and grab and wear as a badge of honor. These Satanists, they are atheists, they are secular, they are not adhering to or believing in anything supernatural. Satan may not even be a figure. Certainly they're not worshiping a real extant devil and sacrificing and expecting things in return. It's more of a character that represents opposition to theology, opposition to Christian theology in particular. But the event that took place that I do have a problem with, they staged a pink mass, and they were trying to push back against Westboro Baptist Church, at the time headed by Fred Phelps. And they did an event at Fred Phelps' mother's gravestone, where they did some sort of incantation that was portrayed as if it were going to change her orientation to lesbian. And I had heard that there was some desecration of the tombstone. Well, the people were rubbing genitals on it. I don't know. My issue with that is this. Fred Phelps' mom didn't raise him, isn't responsible for what he did or Westboro Baptist Church did. Westboro isn't likely to be all that bothered by what they did or didn't do to this tombstone. But that's not just Fred Phelps' mom, that is Nate Phelps' grandmother, a very good friend of mine, who is a activist and spokesperson on behalf of the atheist and secular community. Now, last I heard, Nate wasn't particularly bothered by this either, and I don't care about, when I'm dead, I'm dead. Do whatever you want. You can do a pink mass on me and desecrate. But tombstones and funerals and those things are not about the dead. They are about the people behind. And if you are just trying to offend this group of people by mocking or doing something with their dead ancestors' tombs, I don't see that as a very productive thing, because it affects other people as well. And not just Nate, but other members of the family who have found their way free. It is very much in the shock jock, we're going to get publicity no matter what mentality. I don't put it on the same stage as, oh, you want to be able to hand out your religious paraphernalia and documentation, we get to do that too. So that's one issue where I've had a fairly significant disagreement with them. And all that aside, I'm happy to work alongside some Satanists. I don't like the label. I understand it. I get why it's there. I know what they mean by it. I think there's too much confusion, and I think the Q&A session that happened after the debate demonstrates very clearly that there's too much confusion. They've got too much work to do to basically say, oh, well, we just use the Satanist label as a sort of standard bearer for we are in opposition to these things. But if you actually look at who we are and what we're about, these are all good things. The individual autonomy and freedom and equality, individual responsibility, working cooperatively whenever possible towards a better future, relying on science-based stuff. It's the name. I'm sorry, I don't want to be extremely prescriptivist about it. I see where there's value in the name, but I also see where the name is causing all kinds of problems. And one of the things that concerns me is that there are people who've given up their religious beliefs, not as a matter of choice, you don't choose what you believe, but no longer convinced that their former religion is true. And what their parents want to do, in some cases with young people, is say, oh, this is just a phase. You're just going through a phase. You're just rebelling. You're just rebelling. And I worry that some of them who may find their way to Satanism, ultimately for good reasons, are going to deal with so much more of that, because it's the sort of thing that is in fact rebellion. It is rooted in rebellion. Rebellion for very good reason, but it lends credence to arguments along those lines. I guess my biggest hope is that someday in the future we'll work towards atheist secular normalcy, where we may not need the shock value of Satanists, who are in large part in agreement with secular humanist positions. And we'll look back on this as a time of struggle surrounding the limits of religious freedom, and that we finally got to the right answer or a better solution. And we don't have any need for labels. So we don't have any need for, I'm a Satanist, I'm an atheist, I'm a secular humanist. And that religion isn't viewed as a good thing that has got tax exempt status by default. And that instead, we have a world that reveres scientific inquiry, equality, individual freedom and autonomy, and cooperation, all of which are, at least in large part or some part, tenets of the Satanic Temple. And that's probably one of the big takeaways, is you can share agreement on a great many things, including significant things, and not use the same label. Labels are useful, shorthand, but if the label sparks confusion, if the label gets in the way, then it's time to throw it out and come up with a new label. I'm not saying that Satanists should throw out their label necessarily. I just look forward to a time where that's almost a non-issue, where the label can't possibly get in the way because it's no longer necessary, where it's not more effective for a Satanist group to work to encourage proper separation of religion and government than it is for any secularist or anybody from any other religion. And that's probably all I have to say on Satanists, other than that I enjoyed the debate. I enjoyed learning some things, and hopefully some of them did too, and won't have to be quite so defensive, at least when they find out I'm going to debate a Satanist, which actually I hope to do again someday. Bye-bye. This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.